Schaefer. When you come back from your break, I want you to forget that. And I want you to think in a different time frame. And I want you to think that my name, oh, I'm not going to give you that yet, but that I am a Civil War nurse from Montrose, Pennsylvania. Dale, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Dale Kecklock. I'm a soldier in the Civil War, and I got wounded in one battle, but back to life.
Sort of. I don't know how to say this, but most surgeons and assistant surgeons in the Civil War, they're really difficult to deal with, and apparently ours is very shy down there. Mark, do you want to come up and introduce yourself? Do you want me to say it? I've been practicing it really good. I really have. Mark is the, if I say it wrong, poke me. We'll give you a trick of that. He is the assistant surgeon with the 56th New York State Volunteers. He will be telling you about Civil War medicine tonight. Mark and I met, not stand up. Yeah, well, he didn't stand straight the last time I worked with you. Mark and I met at an encampment down in Taylor, and we just got along. I mean, it just was great. So this is a thrill for me that we're going to have the assistant surgeon here, we're going to have the Civil War nurse, and we're going to have this brave young lad who volunteered in the Civil War. So when you come back from break, don't think of us as who you know we are. Think of us as from the Civil War. Because if you don't, he's very good at amputation. And we will
If I had known that, I would have brought some more.
So if you want to, Joe, you can have the break.
Well, the pizza isn't here yet,
All right.
so you have to wing it.
Oh, that's not a problem. What we'll do is we'll start. Do you want to work a little on yours, or do you want me to start up the, okay. Sure, throw it on the poor old lady. My name is Ellen Elizabeth Mitchell, and I am from Montrose, Pennsylvania. I have just come back from Washington, where I was a Union Army surgical nurse for 4 years. I was asked to come and speak here this evening by Miss Martha Leet. She's the daughter of Dr. Calvin Leet of Friendsville, Susquehanna County, God's country. I know Martha's uncle, Dr. Nathan Leet, one of the finest surgeons that I met in my 4 years of soldier life. The pizza. Real quick, if you're going to allow me, and you have no choice, I will read from my Civil War journal this evening. You will also learn about Civil War medicine, and right now we're going to let you go and have your break and have your pizza. But when you come back, remember, we are all from the Civil War. You really don't know us personally. And I'm going to ask a favor of you. All the questions that you have of the three of us, wait until the end of the program, and then we'll take any questions that you have, and Mark has volunteered, right, Dale? Mark has volunteered to answer them all. Well, that's all right, just wing it. So go and enjoy your pizza, and we'll...
We normally started our meetings before where we did the same type thing. We call it rounds. We've gotten away from it. We also need somebody to conduct our meetings, so if anybody wants to volunteer to do what I'm doing here, I know you can do it better. So just introduce our speakers and present yourself at every one of the meetings. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. As I said before, my name is Ellen Elizabeth Mitchell. And I want you to remember that I'm from Montrose, Pennsylvania. I have just come back from Washington. The war has ended. And our dear President, Lincoln, has been assassinated. So there are many events that are vivid on our minds. I would like, if you will allow me, to read from the journal that I kept during my 4 years in my soldier life, as I like to call it. Let us begin. Over 3,000 to 4,000 women volunteered to help in the war. filled with the fire of patriotism, wives, sisters, sweethearts, mothers, who came from good Yankee stock. Oh, they may have lacked formal training in nursing skills, but they knew they had to do something. Women always know they have to do something. The women thought, I take care of my husband, I take care of my children, I can take care of the wounded soldiers. They were shocked to find when they volunteered that the assignments given to these untrained women were to scrub floors, cook meals, wash clothes, or they were handed a bar of soap and they were told to give a bed bath to a soldier. Now this is not their sons, this is not their husbands, it's not anybody they know. So for the first time that these women who had volunteered were given a bar of soap and a washcloth, can you imagine their shock? These Christian women, they're going to give him a bed bath. Can you imagine his shock? Because he doesn't know this woman either. They got the wonderful job of taking care of the bedpans. And so that they would get some nurse training, the surgeons taught them how to keep the bandages wet. They also learned one other thing, that they would know what the great bell meant. When the fall of Fort Sumter made war inevitable, these first young, come over here, I haven't bitten anybody in years. These first young volunteers, these brave lads, went off to the conflict with every piece of equipment that the female mind could think of and that she could sew. Why, in church basements, offices, homes, women were sewing for the boys. Sewing circles were very common in Montrose. We had one in my church. And on any evening, you would hear the ladies sewing and singing hymns. Groups were formed. In Montrose, the Montrose Soldiers' Aid Society. A Montrose lawyer would give the society space. He would heat the building for 3 winters, and he sent his horse and carriage to pick the ladies up and bring them to their meeting. The motto of the society was, a box a month for the boys. And oh, how those ladies did sew. Shirts, pants. And the first thing that this young man did when he rode home was request the luxury of mom's socks. You liked mom's socks, didn't you? I know you did. I can tell. The reason was, the socks that he was being given had a seam in it. And this poor boy walking 25 miles a day on that seam, you had blisters.
Yes, ma'am.
But he never had them from mom's socks. And that's because moms were knitting. So the ladies were knitting and sewing. There were a few sewing machines in Susquehanna County. They were being worked day and night, and the men were packing the boxes. One thing that every soldier wanted was his own housewife. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Don't I get him trained? It was a very popular item, and the women just kept on making them. What the housewife is it's a sewing kit. And if I would open this up, it looks very much like a pocket with a flap. It contained pins and buttons, scissors, thread, and a needle, and some mending cloth. And if he would rip his clothing, he could sew his own clothing. So every soldier wanted one. It was something that they could put in their haversacks. When I decided to keep a journal, I was trying to think, how do you start the journey? 1861. 2 words, need and confusion. The need was for some type of organized medical system. The first battle of Bull Run proved how disorganized we were. Sanitation was minimal, cleanliness was an afterthought, doctors were in short supply, and so were trained nurses. Then you add the confusion. People who had never traveled more than 5 miles away from home packed up. They took their friends, they took their family, and they all headed to Washington. There was a sense of excitement in the air. They wanted to see what was this great conflict all about. And after all, it wasn't going to last very long. Everyone knew the South wasn't going to fight. Well, when President Lincoln looked out over the White House lawn at this sea of humanity, he saw a need for food, clothing, fresh drinking water, and latrine areas. There's only one way to put this. Thank God for the U.S. Sanitary Commission. They would do what the government was too slow to do for the health and welfare of those boys in blue. They were made up of prominent businessmen, physicians, trained nurses, some of the wealthiest men in the country, and they did something that I hold very close to my heart. They made an organized hospital list. They sent their volunteers out, and they would get the name, the unit, what the wounded soldier was in, the condition, and they would post this daily. A dear friend of mine from my Baptist church in Montrose, a mother looking for her son John, came to Washington. She would check these lists. When she didn't see his name, she went to some of the hospitals. She soon realized he was not there in Washington. But she had thought that he was wounded in the Battle of Bull Run. So she asked me if I would go with her to the edge of the battlefield and we could see if we could find John. God works in mysterious ways. I shouldn't have been out there. We were not allowed to go out there, but we went anyhow. And it would be there that I would meet Lieutenant Bushrod Jones, Assistant Surgeon, 56th New York State Volunteers. And he's still volunteering because he volunteered to come and talk to us tonight about Civil War medicine. Lieutenant, all yours.
I have your casualty sheet. I can't tell you how sick I am of filling these things out. John F. Clem. You ask me why? Where is it?
Over there.
It says ammonia. It's not ammonia. It's whiskey. It's not for the wounded, it's for me. There's nothing funny about it. Every day I fill these out. And then I'm the one that has to go send bodies back or give the bodies to the embalmer. Enough! That's why I'm drinking tonight. That's why I'm in such a bad mood. Civil War medicine. It's the only medicine I know. It's the only medicine I know how to do. It's 1863. Guess what kind of training I had? 2 years. 2 years of medical school. Guess how I learned how to be a surgeon? I watched somebody else. 2 years of medical school. I never removed a bullet. I never amputated a leg, an arm. How did I learn how to do it? I had to watch somebody else. And when I had to do it for the first time, I threw up all over. And yet people laugh. It's not funny. There's nothing funny about it. You saw me come in today with my lieutenant's bars. I don't need lieutenant's bars. I was a hospital steward. A hospital steward. In other words, I was in charge of a hospital. Why was I in charge of a hospital? Because I can read and write. They said, you're going to be in charge of a hospital. I get paid the same as a sergeant. So all I wanted to do was be in charge of the hospital. And no, when our surgeon left, they needed somebody to take over. Well, guess what? I was the only hospital steward in our regiment. Now, I'm the only surgeon in our regiment. Am I dressed? Now, I'm ready for surgery. This is blood from the patients, I should say, that I worked on a week ago. This is probably blood from the patient I worked on this afternoon. Just keeps coming. And you ask me, why do I keep drinking? That's why I keep drinking. Let me tell you about, if I can find it. Let me tell you about some of the things Ellen was talking about. Most of the men that I treat don't, or shall I say, aren't treated for gunshot wounds. They're treated for disease. Why are they treated for disease? Because as Ellen was saying, we know nothing about sanitation. Nothing. You're out in a camp field somewhere, near a stream. You're going to set up your camp by that stream. You're going to drink the water from that stream. What else are you going to do in that stream? What else?
Bathe.
Besides bathe, what's the one thing you're going to do in that stream? Very good. You're going to go to the bathroom in that stream. Then you're going to drink the water. There's nothing funny about it. You're going to have people coming from the city mixed in with people from the country. Most of the people from the country have never been out of the country. Most of the people from the city have never been to the country either. Most of the men have never been within 10 miles of their homes. Well, what happens? You have country, you have city mixing with each other. These men have never had childhood diseases. Guess what? They're going to have them now. And you know what happens when an adult gets measles or mumps? It's mortal. You die. And you ask me, why am I drinking? Nothing funny about it. Dysentery, diarrhea, measles, mumps, malaria, pneumonia. Okay? Neglect of hygiene, plain ignorance, poor food, lack of clothing. That's why I treat people. Out of 620,000 casualties, or deaths, I should say, 620,000 deaths. Only, I say only, 100,000 were from bullet wounds. Out of 620,000, only 100,000 were from bullet wounds. Everything else is from disease. Now, talked about the disease, let's talk about the bullet wounds. Guess what this is? This is what causes those bullet wounds. This is an 1851 Colt Navy revolver. This was issued to the men. Do not have my musket with me, because as a lieutenant, this is what I'm issued. This is what I carry. Oh, but I'm a surgeon. Why do I carry a weapon? Well, opium, more opium, laudanum. Let's see, what else? Laudanum. I have morphine here somewhere. Okay? I have to protect that. That's why I carry a weapon. And then what happens if I find somebody stealing the medicine? I just create more work for myself. And you ask me why I drink. This is a .44 caliber conical ball, or conical shell rather, goes into an Army model of this gun. This is the .36 caliber conical shell that will go into this gun. This is a .58 caliber mini ball. This is what comes out of a musket. When this hits bone, this is what happens to it. When this hits your bone and flattens out, it shatters your bone. If it hits you in the stomach, it tears up everything. Have I ever done an operation to fix something like that? Not in the 2 years that I went to medical school. When did I do it? When I came to Bull Run and all the battles after that. That's why I drink. This is what the cartridge looks like that goes into a rifle. Up here, you have your conical ball or your conical mini ball, and then behind it, you have your powder, and then it's folded over and glued down. It goes in, it's pounded down, a musket cap goes on it, you shoot somebody, and guess what? More work for me. You ask me why I drink. This is a shell fragment from a conical, not a round ball, but the conical balls, the type that look like rockets. That's the only way I can describe it. They're pointy at the end. They look like rockets. Okay, when these came out of cannons, you can see a groove in here. This is where the powder was. This is where the fuse was. When it came out of the cannon, this exploded over your head. Imagine getting hit with this. Guess what? More work for me. Ask me why I drink. Tourniquets, field tourniquets. How does it work? If this young man was wounded in the arm, first thing I would do is get this up here, above the wound, get it as tight as I could, get this through the buckle, and pull as tight as I can. That's going to stop the bleeding. Now, I'm not going to leave that on, I'm just going to show you. Once the bleeding is stopped, if I have instruments, and what you see up here is just what I carry to the field, and I don't even have all my instruments here. This is just my field kit, and I notice that some are missing. So I have to improvise. Well, guess what? Guess what I used this for before? I used this to pry a cap off of my revolver that was stuck. Gee, since I know nothing about sanitation, tourniquet is here. Here's my probe. I have to find a bullet. Here it is, right here, right in. Well, I can feel that there's no bone. Great. Excellent. There's no bone that I can feel. I'll take my probe. I don't have a probe, or I don't have a bullet extractor. Well, maybe I can use these scissors or forceps. Go right in, pull it out. If I felt bone, back to my knife. Before I use my knife, I will use, if I'm lucky enough, I'll have some chloroform or ether. And yes, Civil War doctors, surgeons did have chloroform and ether. Anesthesia started to be used around 1846. So we did have it. How would I administer it? Well, let's see. Oh yeah, here's a dirty handkerchief. Okay, I would get Ellen to hold him down, and I would get an assistant, or possibly myself, hold it over his mouth and nose. When he was unconscious, I will take my knife, cut a slit here, cut a slit here, pull back the skin. Then I will cut the muscle right down to the bone. Then I will take a saw, which I don't have with me, but I will take a saw, cut it off, throw this in a pile. Then I will take a bone saw, again, which I don't have, and file down the bone so it's not sharp. I will then take a curved needle with thread. What type of thread do I use? Well, gee, my mother sent me some sewing thread in my housewife. Guess what I'm going to use? You ask me why I drink. And I will tie off the arteries so they don't bleed. Take this, bring the flap down, sew it up. That takes about 10 minutes. He goes back and I work on the next patient. You ask me why I drink. You can see the sanitary bandages that we use, how clean they are. Oh, look, it just fell in the dirt. Guess what? Next! We'll use this one. You ask me why I drink. That's what Civil War medicine is all about.
Do you want your ballot? Yeah, I think it deserves another drink. The U.S. Christian Commission, which was formed from the YMCA, looked after the minds and the souls of our dear boys in blue. They would come with their stationery, their envelopes, their writing instruments, and most of all, they brought you postage. And they would write the letters, and they would see that the letters were posted, and it would be of no cost to the soldier. They read letters. Let's say his mother sent him a letter. He's had it for 2 months. He knows the words, but he's had an eye injury and he cannot read that letter anymore. If you've ever been away from home, words from home are comforting. The women that volunteered for the U.S. Christian Commission would read those letters. They brought their coffee wagons. They brought their tea. They brought their honey, jams, and bread. And they would come into the hospitals and they would sit with soldiers that we knew were not going to see the morning. And they would comfort that soldier, and they would read to him from the Bible. They also made sure that every soldier had his own Bible. There were over 5,000 volunteers in the Christian Commission alone. Many a volunteer heard what we in the hospital call the sound of wings. But there still was another need. There was no one organizing the trained nurses. And so, Secretary Cameron of the War Department had one name in mind. She was a petite little lady, but she was a fireball. Her name was Dorothea Dix. She had proven her organizational skills in the asylums, and she had many of the qualities that he was looking for. She was self-reliant. She was independent. And this little petite lady was used to being in charge. She did have a flaw. She could not take orders from men. Heaven help the surgeon who would abuse one of her nurses or fire one of her nurses. But the medical care improved, working condition for us nurses improved, and even though behind her back they called her Devil Dix, most of us nurses were proud to be a Devil Dix nurse. Now, qualifications. I want you to raise your hand if you think you qualify to be a nurse for Miss Dix. Mature, over 40. Walt Whitman would say, Dorothea's ideal nurse was 50, plump, and already married. I haven't seen hands going up yet. Okay. Plain in appearance. Homeliness was a virtue. Clothing. Your clothing would be plain. I am wearing what I wore for my 4 years of soldier life. I have, and I'll come around, I have no hoop on, which most women in the Civil War would wear. But in a ward of 30-some beds, I can't get there with a big hoop. So Civil War nurses were not allowed to wear a hoop. Now, what Dorothea didn't know wouldn't hurt her, I could dig out my fancy petticoat and my real fancy bloomers, and she wouldn't know about it. But this is the way we dressed. We were allowed 2 colors, the blue that I'm wearing or a brown which was almost black. Some of the nurses chose a blouse and a skirt and a whole apron. I like the half apron, and I happen to like the jacket. And as you can see, it made it very easy without the hoop to get through the beds. This is the typical shoes of a Union Army nurse. No frills on your clothing, no jewelry. She liked you to have your head covered. And she expected you to be of excellent, I haven't seen a hand yet. She expected.
None of them admit they're over 40.
All right, I'll go for that. All right, now, how about excellent moral character? Oh, come on, Shirley, you can raise your hand. I know you are. She expected you to be of good health. She did not want you coming into the hospital bringing disease. She also didn't want you coming into the hospital looking for a husband. And heaven forbid if you fainted at the sight of blood or an amputation. Now, since no one passed, I'm going to let you know what you missed out on. You would be getting paid 40 cents a day. You sure you don't want to admit how old you are? In April of 1861, as Dorothea was making her way to Washington to accept the post of superintendent of nursing, she would write to me. Dorothea Dix and I were friends. I was living in Montrose, Susquehanna County. After all, I was born up in New Milford. I had many friends. I lived in a very beautiful home. I was highly educated. I was teaching school. The Mitchell family was considered a first family in our area. With that said, I would shock friends and I would shock my family. I left my home in Montrose in May. I went and took a 6-week course of instruction in surgical nursing at Bellevue Hospital in New York at Dorothea's request, and I prepared myself to assume the duties of a Union Army nurse. Due to illness, fatigue, I did not assume my first position until September. At that time, I informed the government and Miss Dix I would take the 40 cents a day, but I would use it for the betterment of the boys, and most nurses did this. I did not want to profit from their suffering. But my first assignment, I was going to the Elmore Hotel Hospital. And as soon as I got there, I was given orders by the surgeon. I had to learn the rules of order, what the great bell meant. It was the serving of the evening meal, when the doctors would do their visits, when the medicine would be administered, and I also had to make sure that I was willing to do a bed bath. Sorry about that. I also had to make sure that all the beds were fixed and tidy. I had to make sure that I would go around and make sure that all the wounds were wet, and make sure that in the evening we had singing in the hospital. I had to have all this accomplished and finished by midnight. Well, much to my surprise, at the Elmore Hotel Hospital, my friends sent us many luxuries. I had to write to Martha Leet and tell her why the good ladies of the Bridgewater Baptist Church sent quilts, blankets, butter, eggs, sauerkraut, cider, jams, jelly, and we even got 16 live chickens. Okay, they were old hens and they were past laying, but could they run? Well, the boys in the ward couldn't stop laughing at us nurses chasing these chickens. But we caught them, and we knew what to do with them. We took them down to the kitchen stand, and that evening we all enjoyed a wonderful meal of chicken stew. And I have to tell you, I have never enjoyed eating chicken as much as I did that evening. The Elmore Hotel Hospital will always hold dear memories for me. I met soldiers who were happy just to receive tea, jam, and bread. And one special evening I will never forget. I heard a young soldier singing a hymn ever so softly to a fellow soldier in blue who had lost his leg in battle. I sometimes still hear that young man singing. Point to point, need to need. It is what we nurses would say to each other, of course never in front of Dorothea. We were always on the move. We went from one hospital to another. There was always a shortage of trained nurses, and my next assignment would be an insane asylum. I went to St. Elizabeth's Insane Asylum, which is on the Potomac in Washington. It was a huge insane asylum, and the Union Army nurses were given an unfinished wing. Well, my first night there had to be the saddest of all my 4 years. I spent the night with a dying nurse. She had typhoid. I wrote in my journal that evening, her name was Mary, and that she passed away at 10 p.m. with only strangers to witness God calling her home. At the end of the year, I took ill, but I was lucky. I had the winter fever, but I was cared for by a wonderful nurse, Miss Jessie Holm, and a surgeon, Dr. Stevens. I believe that God always has a master plan for us, and he was about to test my faith, and he was about to test my strength. I was being sent to Point Lookout, Maryland. Now, Point Lookout, Maryland was a beautiful resort area on the Chesapeake, and the government had leased it. And we were going to have a new hospital. We had a new Surgeon General. He didn't believe in making ballrooms into hospitals and old warehouses. He believed in building a hospital. It would be called Hammond General Hospital. And we started to receive some patients at the end of July. But as soon as the wounded from the second Bull Run started to arrive, I was sent to the warehouse hospital. That was in Georgetown. There was a need for surgical nurses. So many boys suffering. They had laid out on the battlefield, uncared for many days. And the jolting ride of the ambulances did not help their condition. The drivers, which there was a scarcity of, sometimes were not Christians, and they had very low moral standards. And at the sound of cannon fire, they ran, and they left the wounded in the wagons. Not all the drivers, but there's a name that everyone knows, Clara Barton. And we will always remember our dear Clara because she took supplies out to the battlefield and she brought wounded back. We had to close the warehouse hospital because it was a big warehouse. And in February and March, we couldn't keep the wounded warm, so it would be closed. The wounded were moved to several different hospitals, and of course, I was sent off to the Union Hotel Hospital. This was not the cleanest hospital I ever was in. It had poor ventilation, but there was a shortage of nurses. 5 nurses were ill with the winter fever, and 3 with typhoid. So we all did double duty. I really wanted to go to the battlefield. I wanted to go and be where the action was. But because of my nature, I always followed orders. And Dorothea Dix would send me to the night hospital in New Haven, Connecticut. Oh, it was clean, it was well ventilated, we had supplies, but I was weary. I was sick of the war. I decided I would enter in a position in the Treasury Department. But a battle in my home state of Pennsylvania would require me to return to my nursing duties immediately. July 1863, Battle of Gettysburg. Nurses were moved around most of the end of that year. Some of the nurses were sent to Point Lookout, Maryland, where I had been the year before. Only now there was a prison camp. And there was 10,000 Confederate soldiers there, many from the Battle of Gettysburg and many more arriving. The soldiers were housed in tents. There are prisoners. The heat of summer, the mosquitoes, and then we come to winter. They were given 1 blanket. Many froze to death. 3,000 to 8,000 men died of smallpox. I don't think any of us will ever forget the days of fighting at Gettysburg. I firmly believe it changed all of our lives. In May of 1864, I was sent off to Fredericksburg, Maryland, or Virginia. The boys who had fought in the Battle of the Wilderness thought of us angels, thought of us nurses as angels of mercy. When you would walk by the beds, they would grab your hand and they would say, "Nellie, you're my battlefield angel." Do you know how hard it was to hold back the tears? We were doing what was supposed to be done. And what I felt God expected of me. When the Army left Fredericksburg, I was sent again to Judiciary Square Hospital in Washington. I remained there until I have now come home. I have many letters from wives, sweethearts, and mothers looking for their loved one, thanking me for caring for their loved one. I want to share one letter with you. It's very short, but it's my favorite. It says, "Dear Nellie, thank you for the care. Tom, Ward 18. Every evening as I walked through the wards, I would hear those brave boys singing a popular tune, Battle Hymn of the Republic. They were honoring the soldiers who had died in battle. I always said good night to the ward. And when I would leave, I would hope that I did not hear the sound of wings. The nurses and I believed that the sounds that we were hearing were the sounds of angels. I want to thank you for coming to the program. I want to thank you for listening. And if you will allow me to step out and just be plain old Christine Schaefer, I would like to tell you the rest of Ellen Mitchell. It's very short, but I would like you to know this because I'm on a campaign. We in northeastern Pennsylvania do not promote some of the wonderful people that have done wonderful things here. Ellen Mitchell is in a reprint of this very old book, and she's mentioned in here. That's the only mention, and yet she did as well as the Woolsey sisters, as well. Louisa May Alcott only served for 3 weeks. She's got a book. But Ellen Elizabeth Mitchell came home to Montrose. She resumed her teaching, and you're going to have to excuse me because I'm going to use a word that's not politically correct. She taught the children of former slaves at the colored school in Montrose. In 1871, she would graduate from the Women's Medical College of New York. She was now Dr. Ellen Mitchell. She practiced in Wisconsin for 4 years. She would come home to Montrose to take care of her elderly father and very sick brother. And then in 1879, Dr. Ellen Mitchell would do something that most of us in this room might not have the courage to do. She changed her life forever. She was a medical missionary from the Baptist Conference, and she was sent to Burma, India. She would return in 1888. She gave lectures to raise money. She returned to India in 1890. And in 1901, at the age of 72 years old, she was planning to come home. We all do that in our lifetimes. No matter how far we wander, we do come home. She died before she was able to do this. She died of tuberculosis. Ellen Mitchell is a story that needs to be told. Ellen Mitchell is one of our own. And I'm going to work very hard to see that somewhere, someplace, there's a plaque up on Montrose to this woman. If you'd like to know more about her, I would suggest that you go to the Susquehanna Historical Society. It's right there where the library is at the square in Montrose. I get choked up just even saying this. Her journals are there, her real journals. And the letters between her and Dorothea Dix, and the letters from soldiers and other loved ones that wrote to her. Someone kept everything, and it is there. And I know the two ladies that are up there just love to see it because they just love to talk about Ellen Mitchell. And by the way, there's a great place to do lunch there. It's right off on the side. Like I said, I'm very glad that you all came tonight. I have to thank you.
I gotta say something.
Go ahead.
Okay, you know, this is me now, all right?
Yeah.
What I was doing before, That's character. Please, don't think that that was me. Okay, I just wanted to let you know that, just to show you how bad not only the Civil War, but any war is. And that's the reason that guys like Dale and myself do this. It's not to show, it's not to play soldier, okay? If someone says, that's a nice costume you have, you know what? It's not a costume, this is a uniform. And when I put this on, I know I threw it down. That's my character. And believe me, I am extremely proud to have this on and to have this on, okay? And to have everything else on here. We represent members of the Union Army. And believe it or not, the Confederate Army went through the same trials and tribulations that the medical people in the Union did. All right? And just so you know, we don't glorify it. We do this to show you how bad it is. And that was a character out here.
I can attest to that. Don't forget to put the check in the mail, though. I did an encampment, and I had just met him. And he went through this, and I'm standing there, and I'm going, And then I got to know the real Mark, and it is. And that's what we all do. We try to assume the character and do it in the first person. If you have any questions, if you want to come up and look at anything, feel free to. I can answer the nursing questions, and I'll leave all the war to the fellows.
Before you get up and ask any questions, I'd like to have Tom come up, he's our librarian, and present Christine with a lieu of money.
Money.
Plaque for Christine on behalf of the society.
Oh, this is good because I gave Tom his last month. Yeah, I get just.
Okay. This is just a minor thing we're giving to Christine
Joe.
Good, I'll take you.
for her many, many accomplishments and helping the history of northeastern Pennsylvania. Mr. Schaefer.
Thank you, and I'm assuming. What I like about Joe Breyer, and I'm going to embarrass him, is he's the only person that spells my last name, my married name, Schaefer, correctly. Jack, it's the way it's supposed to be.
And since we didn't know, Mark?
Yes.
Mark and Dale were going to be here in time to print up a plaque. We'll have one for them also. Thank you.
Well, they learned the word volunteer.
Well, one more thing I'd like to take care of. We have a Civil War giveaway tonight. Basket, I forget what we call it. I bought 2 tickets, so it's my turn to win. If anybody wants to buy one, we still have room. She still has more tickets there too. If anybody wants to buy one, you save your money though, because I know I'm going to win. I said that the last $50 worth. But it's for a good cause. It helps pay for the pizza. I have a way. So if anybody wants to buy it, now we have to look for an honest person to pull the winning number out. Okay, and if anybody else want to take it, everybody have your ticket ready? Let's see, who do we get to pull out a ticket? Who do we get to pull out a ticket? You have a ticket there too, Nancy? Well, we can't trust her to do it.
Well, how about the nurse?
How about who?
The nurse.
How about the doctor?
She might have a ticket here. You
No,
don't
I
have a
don't have a
ticket?
ticket. I have a ticket, though.
Okay, but if she can't see, there you go.
Yeah, just get
She
it.
looks reasonably honest. That would be amazing. Last 3 digits.
652,
652.
Not me.
over there.
Fix. New member. The guy just joined tonight.
Well, that's wonderful.
That's terrific. What an ordinary thing. Thank you. Okay, please extol your answer to your question.
How about questions?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just go ahead.
I was wondering, a couple times you mentioned winter fever.
Winter fever was pneumonia. They had a lot of different names for what illnesses we have, but winter fever is pneumonia.
Do the nurses die as frequently as the males did, or still diseases?
No, because there wasn't the equal population. I mean, when you think of how many men actually fought in the Civil War. Yeah.
Not as many female nurses, so there's 5,000 nurses.
I only found several records that showed that some nurses died from typhoid and one or two from the winter fever into the pneumonia. Most recovered, or like Louisa May Alcott, and I'm sure we've all read Little Women. She got typhoid and she just quit being a nurse. And that was the other thing they did. They would go home. So you really don't know what happened to them. Yeah.
I can give you some names here, like winter fever, let's see. Absepsia was blindness. I can't even pronounce some of these, because I can't read my own writing. Abscessus is a swollen or inflamed area or pus gather. Oh, abscess, okay. Was
Like that bottom.
recurrent fever and chills of malaria. Okay, let's see. Ambustio would just be a burn. Okay. Ankylosis, stiffening of the joints. Apoplexy, I know you've heard that.
Yeah.
Stroke. Bilious fever, okay, fever caused by liver disorder. Lumbago, backache, lung fever, pneumonia, okay. Miasma, poisonous vapors thought to infect the air. Mellitus, inflammation of the spine. Palsy is just what it says. Pleurisy is tuberculosis. Scarlet fever, okay, that was something really big in the 1860s. Disease, let's see, red rashes and sore. Consumption, also tuberculosis. Camp, colic. Appendicitis. I don't know. Croup is laryngitis or strep throat. Spotted fever, typhoid. Let's see. Grip is influenza. And diphtheria, disease of the throat.
Typhoid was the #1 killer, and then dysentery was the second, and then third was pneumonia, of all the things. Do you want to explain to them what wetting that bandage was? I had the nurses doing that all the time.
Wetting the bandage, okay. You wet the bandage, and the thought was that a wet bandage is going to help with healing. I don't know, that was just a thought. The other thing was, they waited for pus to form. Because if there was pus coming out of this young man's stump after I cut it off, that means he's healing.
Oh dear.
Okay, so if you saw pus, you went, very good, you'll be back and fighting in no time. All right? What happened to Stonewall Jackson? Thomas J. Jackson. He had his left arm cut off right about here. But believe it or not, he would have lived. Problem is, he caught pneumonia. That's what killed him, not the bullet wound. Now, the farther away from your body the amputation was, the more of a chance you had of surviving. Closer, the less chance you have. But he would have lived. It's pneumonia that killed him. There was something else I was going to tell you.
Well, let's see. Anybody else got a question?
I have a question for the doctor.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had opium and heroin there. What was that for? Like
Okay.
pain relief after
I will-
surgery?
I will tell you exactly what they were used for. If I can find it in my book of... See, doctors, like I said, I would have only been practicing for, well, only had 2 years of medical school. So every surgeon would have had a book that he could look in or something that he would have had notes in, and this is mine. Let's see. Opium. Just bear with me. Okay. If you have diarrhea, we give you some opium. If you had, what's the opposite of diarrhea? Constipation, we give you something called blue mass, or, where is it here? blue mass or mercury pills. Now, we all know, now these would have been blue except I ran out of them. But blue mass was mercury pills and chalk. Oh, gee. Yeah, she's shaking her head. That's right, poison. But you know what? I don't know that. It works, it cures it. But at the same time I'm curing you, I'm also poisoning you. Okay?